Hey guys, welcome back to Read Instead. I am Jake. Glad to be with you tonight. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope 2025 greets you well. I hope you have a fantastic, beautiful year filled with lots of great books and stories that'll move you in many different ways. I can't believe we're here. I'm making this video. I've been anticipating this video for quite a long time. I've been looking forward to it, mainly because I've had such an extraordinary year when it comes to the books that I read. Uh, really, it wasn't difficult to make this top 10 list. All in all, I read 35 books this year. This year tended to be, it was like the year of big, gigantic books for me. I don't know why. I've talked about this in previous videos. There was no real rhyme or reason to it. Just the books that I sort of happened to read this year, for the most part, were bigger books, and I think that sort of cut down on just the number of books that I actually read this year compared to previous years. This is like in the past 4 years probably the lowest amount of books that I've read in a year. But aside from that, like I said before, I don't care as long as they're good books. Let's get something out of the way real quick though, because I did mention this before, that I was going to let you guys know I had one dud on this list of all the books that I read in 2024. One book that I just did not dig at all, and I'm pretty sure I gave it 1 star on Goodreads. Let's get this out of the way. This book right here, The Girl on the Train, or it should be called The Drunk Girl Who Has to Decide Every Day Whether She's Gonna Drink or Not. Listen, guys, please remind me never to read another book again where the main protagonist, not the protagonist, the point of view character is a drunk, and not a real entertaining drunk at that. I honestly felt like half of this book was just this girl figuring out like how to drink and get away with it, and then there was just like this sort of murder mystery thing tied into it, a past weird relationships with this guy and that guy. It's like, it wasn't entertaining at all. It like just even the murder mystery was mediocre at best, but then just coupled with this woman just constantly, I haven't drank in 48 hours, but I know there's a bottle of red wine down in the cupboard. Should I go get it? If I wait till my roommate leaves, she'll be gone to work and I should be able to get it, and then I can refill it with cranberry juice, and so she won't know. It's like, dude, not entertaining at all. So there you have it. That was the one dud I had. Okay, and one more thing. Quick December review. I read 3 books in the month of December to finish off the year. I made a review of this. This is Rabbit Run by John Updike. I also read The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. And then I read Diana Gabaldon's Outlander, the first book in the Outlander series. I'll do like a December wrap up, probably my next video, but I just want to say before I get into this top 10 list, this was really, really good. And I was tempted to put it in my top 10 for the year, but I'm a big believer, I don't know, I'm a big, like, I know that recency bias exists, okay? And a lot of times, like, you'll see Academy Award winning movies. They came out in the fall or towards the end of the year, and they weren't really as good as maybe a couple of the ones that came out in January and February. But they're just so fresh on everybody's mind, and the emotions of the reaction to it and stuff like that. This was an awesome book. I'm sure. I don't know how I'll feel about it in 6 weeks or 2 months or something like that, but right now I can tell you that this was really, really cool. One of the better thrillers like I've ever read. But still, for whatever reason, I'm just not going to put it on this list. But if I can just do like one honorable mention. This comes in 11th place right here, The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into my top 10 books for the year 2024. Number 10. The Last Coyote by Michael Conley. This is the 5th book in the Harry Bosch, I believe it's the 5th book in the Harry Bosch detective series, LAPD. You guys know that I'm a big fan of that series. And this was like probably the best book that I've read so far in the series. It's interesting compared to like you go on Goodreads and maybe just listen to some other reviews in regards to the Harry Bosch series. I tend to like maybe the books that aren't as popular as some of the other ones, and I'm not as big a fan as the ones that are really popular for whatever reason that is. I don't know, but I really enjoyed this. It started to. It's the first book where Harry Bosch, the main detective and protagonist in this book, is sort of mysterious through the first three or four books, and you know that a little bit about his past and his upbringing and stuff like that, but you don't know too much about it. And this really gets into it. And what he does in this novel is solve his, or he attempts to solve his mother's murder that happened to him when he was very young, and that sort of was the catalyst that put him into foster homes and orphanages and stuff like that. I read this. I went on a wedding trip over the summer. Friend was getting married, and I was just really digging this book. I read it was only like a 3-day trip or so, and I read the whole book during that time. So number 10 on the list, The Last Coyote by Michael Conley. Okay, number 9 on the list. This will be the fourth and final book in the Faithful and Fallen series by John Gwynne, entitled Wrath. I would say books 2, 3, and 4 in the series were really, really good. It's hard to when you have a series that's sort of one congruent story like this one is. There's good action in each of the series. There's a good character arcs throughout all 4 of the books in this series. This one just sort of, it's like everything got tied together, and I thought that John Gwynne did it well, tying everything together. A lot of storylines. It says, "Even the brave will fall." That's sort of the catchphrase down here, in this series, and that is certainly true. And a lot of them don't fall till the last third of this book or so. But just really, really cool how it ended. Again, action packed. Sort of you're waiting for a battle to take place for the entire series, really, and all these sort of different forces converge on this one place, and you have this huge epic battle. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Very entertaining. I like this fantasy series a lot. Again, The Faithful and the Fallen. This is book number 4, and this comes in at number 9 for me. Wrath by John Gwynne. Okay, number 8 on the list. Charming as can be, moving in sort of a different way, but a book that is going to stick with me for a long time, and that is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The story of an aristocrat in prior Bolshevik Russia, when Russia begins to be a socialist state and stuff. This guy just didn't fit in with the new socialist regime, and instead of just having him executed because he was so well known and sort of loved by a lot of people around Russia, they place him in house arrest in a hotel, and he's confined to this place. And this story is really just the going ons inside of this hotel, and how he develops different relationships with different people. And he's almost like he's just a very charming man, the main character in this book, and he's interested in other people's lives even more than his, it seems, in a way. And has this sort of melancholy inward sorrow for the way in which Russia is changing. This man, I guess the best way to put this novel is, this is a Russian man who is filled with charm, and when Russia begins to turn socialist, it loses its charm, and you have this contrast between this man and the country in which he belongs to. And it was just very, very beautiful. It was beautifully written too. This guy, Amor Towles, my first novel by him, extremely skilled writer, beautiful. I remember there was one paragraph, really like a page in this book, where it just describes the Count, this main character, getting up and making himself coffee in the morning, and the way in which it was written was just so beautiful. I will never forget it. That's one page describing a man making coffee. So that goes to show you what kind of writer this guy is. So this will be number 8 on the list, A Gentleman in Moscow by Immortals. Okay, number 7 on the list. When I reviewed this book a few months ago, I was sort of shell shocked by it. And this would be The Cartel by Dawn Winslow. And the reason why I was so shocked by it is because of the violence and the not just the violence, the extreme measures of fear mongering that takes place. I hope that makes sense. Cartels don't just want to kill people; they want to intimidate people, and the violence in this book. Just a fair warning to anyone. This is actually the second book in the series. If you guys have been following this channel for any length of time, you know that the first book in this series, called The Power of the Dog, is one of my favorite novels of all time. This wasn't as good as that, but it was very good. And, great characters from, there's a DEA agent, an American DEA agent that's basically, become a Mexican citizen. He lives down there and works with the local law enforcement agencies in Mexico, trying to not stop the war on drugs because it seems unstoppable, but maybe to slow it down a little bit. And that there's like a journalist that comes on the scene in this book that is a memorable character, also a nurse who ends up being sort of an aid worker and a political activist against the cartels. There's just Dawn Winslow writes really, really good characters, and of course, some of the cartel leaders from the previous book are still in this novel as well. So when I first finished this book, I didn't love it so much because it was just so shockingly violent, if I can say that correctly. So shockingly violent, the atrocities that take place. And by the way, like it's based off real events, which is sad. But that's why I was just had such sort of a nasty taste in my mouth, if you will, after I finished this. But months later, I can recognize this for a terrific novel that it is. And that would be The Cartel. This is number 7 on the list, The Cartel by Dawn Winslow. Okay, number 6 on the list. This was a great summer read for me. And that would be Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia. I hope I'm saying that right. Delia Owens. And this is the story of a young girl who grows up in the marshlands of North Carolina, and her family abandons her, and she becomes self-reliant and reliant on the nature around her, and the nature that the marshlands of North Carolina form this girl into who she is, and she really becomes a very the way in which she perseveres and becomes a young adult is very beautiful. And this was just the one thing I think for most readers that will stick with you is the way in which Delia Owens makes the nature, the marshlands itself, the marshlands of North Carolina are a character in itself in this book. It's beautifully written, and it's a good story too. There's sort of like a courtroom drama, murder mystery kind of thing that takes place. It's sort of, there's like a 12-year time gap, and it's 2 stories about the same girl, but it's like telling where she's at in, say, 1969, and then it's also giving you what was happening to her in 1957 or something like that. And it was really well paced. It was well paced. So number 6 on the list for me, and the best books that I read in 2024 will be Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Okay, I can't believe we made it. The top 5. It's getting pretty serious. Okay, let's get right into it. Number 5. The 5th best book I read in the year 2024 will be Robert McCammon's Swan Song. Let me tell you something. I've never read a book that is almost 900 pages and it felt like 300. It really did. And this is the story of nuclear fallout, nuclear war fallout in America, and it follows basically three or four different, completely random characters, three or four different storylines, and they all sort of are on a path to converge at some point. But there's also some fantasy elements that are in this novel, and the main character, this girl named Swan, and you see her grow from about the age of 10 or 9 or something like that to about 19, and she is certainly one of the most memorable characters that I think you'll ever read. Extremely compassionate, and she has these powers I won't get into. I don't want to spoil anything, but the humility in which she also has, having these powers is just it's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. It's a thriller. It's fantasy. It's about relationships. It's about coming of age. There's so many elements that make this novel what it is. But at the end of the day, I guess the best word to, if I'm going to label it with one word, it'll be entertaining. Because again, if you can read a book that's almost 900 pages and want it to go on for another 300 or 400 pages, and you'd be absolutely fine with that. I think that just speaks to what kind of writer Robert McCammon is, and what kind of novel this is. So number 5 on the list, Swan Song by Robert McCammon. Okay, number 4 on the list, and some of you might call this a novella or maybe even a short story. It's actually not labeled as that if you look it up on Wikipedia or something like that. But number 4 on the list will be The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. And I guess the reason why this is so high up on the list for me, besides just a very enjoyable read, is that it introduced me to Ernest Hemingway, and I'm very grateful for that. And a friend of mine gave me this. He just kind of was like, one day, it's something you just throw in your back pocket. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, read this. I read it every couple of years. Hey, take this home and read it. And I read it in about 2 or 3 days. It's only 130 pages or so, and I was just so moved. And I was so moved by Ernest Hemingway's writing. Let me just fun little quick tidbit about that, right? So at some point, like in the months after I read this book, I watched the movie by Woody Allen called Midnight in Paris. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that, but there's a character in that movie based on Ernest Hemingway. It is Ernest Hemingway, the character. And there's a few pieces of dialogue in that movie in which the actor, goes on this monologue, and it's really beautiful. And it never clicked in my head because I had never read Ernest Hemingway before. But those monologues in that movie, he's speaking like Ernest Hemingway writes, and it was just so beautiful, and like it was just so cool that Woody Allen did that in the movie. But I was so intrigued by this guy's writing. Listen, this is just about, this whole story is about an old man that lives in Cuba, and he gets up one day and heads out to his boat, and he heads out and he needs to sort of make his catch for the day. He's a fisherman, and he gets a very big fish on his line, and most of this book is just that man fighting against this fish and trying to bring it in. And there's so much subtext, and so many sort of like parables that I think are taught maybe through that old man's experience. But more than anything, it's just a beautifully and truthfully written. And I would encourage you guys, this is a very small investment book, meaning it wouldn't take a lot of time to finish. But it's so good that I would just implore you to check it out. The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, number 4 on the list of my best books that I read in 2024. Okay, number 3, we're in the top 3 now. And I mentioned to you guys in a previous video some things that I learned about myself in 2024. I did a video on that, things that I learned about myself as a reader, and I willfully and freely admitted to you that Ken Follett is my favorite author on the planet. And that's why number 3 on the list is going to be The Man from St. Petersburg. Just an awesome thriller that grabs hold of you, and it really doesn't stop. And the different characters, most of all, the antagonist, the assassin who's trying to, assassinate a diplomat. His name is Felix, and his backstory, and every time Ken Follett would go to him, every chapter, that's how this book's written. That's how a lot of books are written. Each chapter bounces from point of view to point of view, and every time it would go to this man Felix, I was just like, I was glued to the page, man. This guy trying to plot and scheme to complete an assassination, and it just keeps you gripped all the way to the end. And then there's like some sort of family drama that also takes place about three-quarters of the way through this book, and you're just like, can it get any crazier? That's what you'll be asking yourself. But just extremely entertaining. Number three on the list, The Man from St. Petersburg by Ken Follett. Okay, so number two on the list. How do I do this? I don't want to cheat. But I wasn't going to pick two books from the same series to be on this list. My dilemma is this: is that these two books that are in this same series are very different from one another. Remember how I told you before that there are trilogies and series of books that just run very congruently. It just seems like one story. They just had to break it up into 3 or 4 books, otherwise it would be like 4,000 pages long. Well, this is not like that. These two books are certainly part of the same series, but they are two very, very different books. So I hope you guys don't mind me saying that number two on the list is Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Okay? I read this. This was like one of the first books that I read this year in 2024. I just read this, I believe, last month. And I'm just blown away by the sophistication of Dan Simmons, the plotting. It's just like, that's all I can say. I can just say Dan Simmons is a genius. If I tried to sit here and tell you guys, try to explain, it would just, honestly, like, you would need 4 hours to talk about these books, and then I'd only be scratching the surface. But in short, this is just the introduction to the characters, really. 7 characters that are in the series. This whole book is just 7 chapters, and it's the introduction of these characters. Then this really gets into like the story, and this turns into sort of like a space opera kind of thing, more action packed and stuff like that. But both books extremely riveting and entertaining, and just genius. That's the best word I can use to describe Dan Simmons and these novels. And they're just they'll really throw your mind for a loop in a good and fun and in an enjoyable way. So doesn't matter. You want me to pick this one? You want me to pick this one for number two? It doesn't matter. Okay, ready? I'm gonna shuffle them in my hand. Shuffle, and what's this one? Okay, Hyperion. There you go. Hyperion, number two on the best books that I read in 2024. Okay, last but not least. Was this difficult? Was this decision difficult? Yes and no. I'd say between two, the Hyperion books and this, it was a little difficult. But as I continued to think about it, the thing for me, the sign of a great novel is something that even when you think about it, months later, maybe even years later, I don't know. Let me know if you guys have ever if you can recall a book that you read years before and it still evokes a certain emotion within you. Well, I read this book a few months ago, and even today, when I still think about it, it's almost like I can smell the pine trees in the forest. I don't know. It brings me right back to the novel. So elegantly and beautifully written and entertaining, lots of good plot and a story of survival. Just like really 3 characters in this entire book, and you love every one of them. And I was just on this journey from beginning to end. And there's so many passages in this book I was so moved. I could keep talking about it, but I might as well just lift it up for you guys, right? So you can see it. Number one, the best book that I read in 2024 is Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier. I don't know what else to say. It's a story of a man who has this brief romantic encounter with this woman. This takes place in the South during the American Civil War, and he has this brief encounter, and they both sort of, recognize each other for who they are. I don't know if it's like love at first sight, but I think they anticipated him coming home from the war and starting a life together. Okay, well, he doesn't feel like he wants to wait that long, and at the very beginning of this book, he just gets up out of a military hospital in the South and says, "I'm out of here," and he deserts and starts to head back to his woman. And she's back on Cold Mountain where they come from, and she's trying to survive herself because her father had just passed away, and she's left like with this farm and this house, and she has no idea how to really do much. And then sort of a friend comes along and starts to help her and teach her how to do certain things. So you have this whole beautiful story of this woman who's maturing in so many ways and learning to really do the grunt work like of a farm and surviving in her own right. And then you have this man who's a Confederate deserter trying to get back to his woman, and he's you know hiding from bands of Confederate soldiers that go out and just basically kill deserters, and of course he's trying to survive all the elements of being, nature and going through the woods. He's basically just walking, not basically, he is just walking home, and this is like 1864 or something like that. So, but, even more so than that, the plot, I was just talking to you guys about the plot. I connected so much with Charles Frazier's writing style. Just absolutely beautiful. Um, Beautiful. I don't know. I would just encourage you guys to read this book. It's pretty well known. It's pretty highly decorated. National Book Award winner. It's probably got more awards than that. I don't know. It was made into a pretty successful movie in the early 2000s. Uh, that's it. Cold Mountain, my number one book for 2024. As always, I hope you guys are reading something really good. Get excited about the books that you plan on reading for 2025. I hope you guys got some good books planned out, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.